Okay, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977, directed by Steven Spielberg, written and directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Richard Dreyfuss, Melinda Dillon, Francois Truffaut, Terry Garr, Bob Balaban. This is my choice, but I think we were talking off camera last time, Jonny. I mentioned this movie, and you're like, ooh, I know some guests that we can have on. So you volunteered guests for this. And it's somebody that we are familiar with and somebody that we're not familiar with for NostalgiaCast. We've got the crew of Paperback Flicks. We've got Ruth Craddock and Rae Davidson. How are you two doing?
I'm doing great. I love this.
Okay. Sorry, Ruth is using sign language, which I guess ties in with the movie and what it's about. So I like this because obviously we have Ruth on every season, and then I've wanted to have Rae on for quite a bit. I was on your podcast just recently to talk about Jaws, which is a bucket list thing for me. And again, if both of you wanted to kind of tag team it, explain to us what Paperback Flicks is and what you try to do and what you've done in the past. If you could give us a little bit of rundown of your awesome podcast.
Sure, Rae, you start.
Okay, so the premise of the podcast is books with film adaptations. We read the books, we watch some to all of the adaptations. Sometimes they're a little...
Rae watches all of them.
I watch everything I can find. And
the
then
17,000 Pride and Prejudices. I think you watched all of them, right?
100 million.
Yeah.
She nearly did.
And then I get all of the information wrong, and Ruth laughs at me.
That's what we do here. Darin laughs at me when I get things wrong.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It makes it feel more real, like we're regular people, because regular people forget stuff all the time.
So that basically sums it up.
Professional around here.
I guess, Ruth, you didn't want to add anything else. That basically sums it up. Just Rae gets stuff wrong and you laugh at her. That's.
It's more than that. We kind of just go off talking about movies in general and the things that we love and hate, and sometimes we get off subject to completely random things that may or may not pertain to the movie we're talking about. We also do indie author interviews, like once in a while with independent authors, because I'm an indie author and I like supporting other authors. And yeah, so that's the other thing we do.
Okay.
What I think has been cool about watching you guys do this podcast is I've started to read more. Like I read a lot of the books with you, and
I'm using my credits.
Yeah, I use your credits, and I don't read, I listen.
Yeah, I listen too.
But so we got it on camera. Paperback Flicks taught Jonny how to read.
Yeah. It's been fun. It's been fun. It's a good podcast. You guys are doing a really good job.
Yeah. It was great joining you for Jaws. Jaws is one of those movies that when Jonny and I started NostalgiaCast, I was like, I'm not talking about Jaws because that's what can I say about it? So being able to talk eventually book in the Spielberg movie with you two was like I said, a bucket list thing. And that was a super fun conversation. All the things we're able to talk about. So yeah, go check out Paperback Flicks. Go check out especially that episode. Jonny, you're also on for Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah,
recently,
yeah,
right?
That was my first time joining them. Yeah.
Okay, so it's always nice just having a spouse just ready to pull, or a spouse's friend.
And I chose that episode because she gave me that book for Christmas, so that was the reason why I chose that episode.
Okay, another good one. Yeah, listen to Jaws first, and then if you want, listen to Sherlock Holmes. Anyway, so when I mentioned Close Encounters, and Jonny said that Paperback Flicks wanted to be on, what was the reasoning for it? Why did you want to join us for Close Encounters, Rae and Ruth?
So I know for me, all of my life, I don't know why, but I have been very into high strangeness. And if you don't know what that term is, it's the cryptids, it's the UFOs. I don't know. I don't even know what I believe anymore with all that stuff, except that I love it all. So
I gotta know what low strangeness is then. If that's high strangeness, what's low strangeness?
Low strangeness is coincidences. Coincidences that might be more than coincidence. High strangeness is you can't explain it. But
supernatural.
Yeah.
X-Files.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. And so Close Encounters, you said, I think we're talking off camera that it was high on your list of movies that you wanted to chat about 70s wise, right? When we decided we wanted to have one of you on, at least. Is that right?
Yeah. Ruth mentioned it to me and I was like, yes, that's it. That's the one.
Well, that's when you guys started talking about doing 70s movies, I realized I don't know a lot of movies that are in the 70s. And if they're in the 70s, I wasn't aware of it. So I'm like, crap, I gotta go look up 70s movies. And this is one of the movies I know is from the 70s that like I don't have to look this up. I'm like, oh yeah, this is one of the things I think of when I think 1970s movies. Close Encounters is one of them.
Yeah, it's weird to think that both Star Wars and Close Encounters were released this same year. I think Star Wars was May and this was more Christmas, I think, when they released it. Columbia was like on the verge of bankruptcy and they rushed Spielberg getting it out, which is amazing that the movie is as good as it is, kind of being a rushed schedule, even though they had time. Obviously, the special effects were really tough to manage, and it's I think it's really impressive, all the stuff they were able to pull off. So we want to talk about that a little bit. I just thought that 70s stuff, Jonny, you and I picking 70s is crazy because all the stuff that's going on now with the superhero movies and the IP that are kind of not making as much, like people have lost interest in it seems like. And it's a reminder of the 70s because like the 50s movies and the epics, like we talked about before, those were falling out of favor. So Spielberg and De Palma and Lucas and Scorsese and all of them coming out of the woodwork kind of revitalized the cinematic landscape. And it's interesting seeing that happen then and also seem to be happening now, even though we haven't had a resurgence from anything. We're just kind of in limbo right now, waiting for that stuff to come out. It's odd, Jonny, that we picked this decade and it's kind of playing out today. I thought it was kind of really interesting and just looking back on that stuff.
Well, it's only a matter of time because history repeats itself, and so there will be a resurgence, I believe. Yeah, just waiting for it to happen.
Spielberg is actually on record. They asked him about the superhero boom, and he said there's going to be a fallout. You're going to have maybe one movie or a series of movies that's going to signal like the fall of what was popular, like Westerns had a falling out, back in the 50s, 40s, that kind of thing. So, and then when Spielberg said that, people were like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You just hate superhero movies. But like Spielberg lived it. Like he was part of that revitalization in the 70s. That's what's so exciting about this decade is there's so much rediscovery, and it's not just the nostalgia stuff. Like these days, nostalgia is just kind of spewed out just for the sake of nostalgia. Like a Ghostbusters movie, somebody saying, I need to make a phone call, and here goes, who are you going to call? Like that's only for a specific amount of people. It's not, it's not organic to the movie itself. What's great about Spielberg and De Palma and Lucas and Scorsese taking these movies and from their childhood, everything they loved, and then they're making new complete versions of it that don't just feel like nostalgia bait, that feel like a new kind of language that people are responding to. That's what makes the 70s so exciting. But a lot of people, it's funny because we're not having the same success with the 70s decade that we had with the 90s decade, because people apparently there's something online where it's like, oh, movies before 1986 didn't exist, and so people just aren't interested in watching.
What?
Yeah, it's like they don't want to watch movies that are black and white. Some idiot or a bunch of idiots are saying that, oh, a movie that was made before 1995 has no bearing on today, like they're all lifeless and boring.
What are you talking about? How do they? It's building blocks. You don't just suddenly have the second story of a building without the basement and the story below. It's built off of what came before. That's the stupidest thing anyone could say.
Yeah, and it seems to be like a pandemic.
It's kind of one of those, like, every generation thinks that they like every teenager thinks that they like invented like sexual deviancy, and every generation thinks that like we're the first to do this. This isn't your mama's whatever, because they don't get it because we're new and special, and none of us are special. Like when I hear that, when I hear like nothing was good, but nothing has any relevance to today before like 95 or whatever, you're missing so much. And when I watch these movies, a lot of the times, whether it's for Paperback Flicks, or I watch a lot of the NostalgiaCast stuff, and I'll be like you guys just did the was it Black Stallion that you just did? And I was like, oh man, like I remember that. I remember liking it, and I remember I haven't seen it since I've been an adult, and so we watch it with my kids, and they were like, this is like so new and amazing. And I'm like, guess what? It's from before I was born. Like they don't like, I don't know. It is kind of sad to me how often people are like, oh, well, we are living in the time. And I'm like, dudes, you're missing so much.
Yeah.
There's a reason movies are good today or whatever, and it's has nothing to do with today. Sorry.
Well, that was one of the reasons why we started NostalgiaCast, because we wanted to rediscover these movies. And so discovery is a big part of it. And that's why I picked the 70s decade, because I wanted to discover movies I haven't seen before. And even though I've seen Close Encounters, it was still fun to go back and rediscover it.
It's like Ruth, you're saying, it's like the building blocks, right? It's like everything, there's nothing. That's a sad thing, is people, I think they are, Ray, just like you said, it's like like you didn't invent this. Like it's just been redone. It's maybe given a new coat of paint, right? Somebody on Twitter they asked for what was the greatest debut of any director, and somebody posted Reservoir Dogs from Quentin, which is fine, but I'm like, okay, me personally, that's great, but I can't list somebody that way if he's taking influence from like a dozen other movies and interweaving them into his own movie, right? It's not, to me, it doesn't come across as creating a new language. It's just taking what we've seen before. Like Reservoir Dogs obviously is like the Kubrick movie The Killing, The Big Combo, a bunch of those film noirs is what that movie is taking after, right? So I personally, I can't, like, if you're just sampling from other directors, sure, that's great. Like Pulp Fiction is great to watch, but it didn't invent everything that you're seeing. It just kind of, like I said, it gives it a new coat of paint. And that's, again, that's the thing with the 70s, what makes it so great.
And like, I think it's more interesting knowing what the influences were. Like, you listen to music, sometimes you can tell who somebody was influenced by what came before. But they didn't like copy it exactly. They still took what they loved and they made their own thing out of it. And I think that's essentially what we do as human beings. Like, we take what our parents teach us and what we learn from around us, and then we kind of make it our own.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we didn't invent it, but we're doing it in our own little way. Everything's just more, it's so much more 3D, more rich when you know the history.
Yeah. Well, for Paperback Flicks, have you two covered Ella Enchanted by any chance?
Yes.
We did, yes.
So I think I've listened to that one, but what I'm reminded of a story, because Anne Hathaway sings Somebody to Love in that, right? And I remember being with a youth group or something like that. They're taking them on a trip somewhere, something like that, where they were younger kids. And some Queen's Somebody to Love came on the radio, and one of the girls said, "Oh, this is that Anne Hathaway song." And I think my brain exploded, and I had to pull over to the side of the road, because it's like, oh, okay. So again, we're going to that thing, like, that song wasn't invented with that movie. Ray, it's like you're saying, you're missing out on so much by just shutting yourself off and not being educated with movies from the past. John, and we had Jason on to talk about Captain America, of all things. One of the conversations that we had there was, it doesn't lessen your experience, right? If you watch Jaws and know that Spielberg took inspiration from Creature from the Black Lagoon, it doesn't lessen your experience watching Star Wars, knowing that Lucas took like Kurosawa films and war films and integrated them. That doesn't,
Westerns too, yeah.
in Westerns, it doesn't
that makes it
lessen
more fun, honestly.
Yeah, it enriches that experience. I think that's what a lot of people are just missing out on. It's just it's frustrating. I don't want to be that guy that says watch more movies and try to sound all uppity, but it's literally watch more movies so you can appreciate what's come before and how it enriches your experience. I don't know. It's just, and again, the 70s is a big part of that. So again, that was a tangent, but it's something that I think we need to talk about. Back to Close Encounters, though. If we wanted to talk about our first experiences, mine's going to be quick. It's obviously with Jaws, like we talked about. Spielberg was the first director that I really got to know and studied. And Close Encounters, I remember seeing this from a very young age, and it was always the movie about aliens, and I never had bad feelings towards it. It just didn't affect me like Jaws or Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's a movie that every time I watch it, I learn more things and I kind of grow into it. I think it was too mature for me at the time. But it's definitely something that I adore now. Just one at a time. Jonny, what was your experience with Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Well, similar to yours, I've only seen it once until last night when we watched it again. But I don't remember much about it. I must have been really young when I saw it. It did kind of leave an impression, like I remembered little, bits and pieces of it, but I didn't remember a lot of it. So watching it again, I was like, oh wow, I didn't even know that was in there. I didn't know that was in there, and I didn't remember a lot of the movie. So it was almost like a new experience for me.
Right. Okay. Ray, what about you? You said you're like the high, the mysterious stuff, the
high strangeness.
stuff.
That's
high
right.
strangeness. There you go. I'm gonna have to burn that in my brain. I love that. But
I know.
what was your experience with Close Encounters and all that?
So my dad, almost all of these movies, we've talked about it on ours. We talked about it with Jaws. I saw the TV version because my dad would like when he was home, he was the boss of the TV. Like if you were watching TV, it was whatever dad was wanting to watch. And
I think
so
that's just how it is everywhere, right?
maybe. So he would, whatever he was watching, like I may not have like interest in it or whatever, but back in the day when like Fridays and Saturdays, maybe even Sundays, like they would have like a station would play like 3 movies over and over and over again,
Oh,
all for like 48 hours or whatever. And so he would watch something and he'd be falling asleep. And so over and over again for like a month, Close Encounters was one of the movies that kept cycling through. And so I had seen all of it, but I hadn't seen it all in order for like a long time because I wasn't super interested in it. So I would see some of it, I would go off and do something else. And then people would make references. I feel like kind of like what we were talking about before, people used to assume that your audience was knowledgeable. You know, comedy was clever because all the inside jokes that everybody's in on because you watched the movie, you know, like, and that was kind of how it was where people would say something, they were like, oh, is it Close Encounters or is it ET? Like, you know, where are we? Like, you know, and I would be like, kind of like, I'll say now, I'm like, wait, what music do you hear? Is this a rom-com or is this a horror flick? Like, you know, and that's what people used to do with Close Encounters. And so when I was in high school, I was like, I need to know. I need to know so that when they make the reference, I'm not the only idiot that doesn't get it. And so I specifically watched it, but it was still like a TV cut. It was like like a not full cut. Does that make sense? Like edited for time or whatever. And so I had never actually seen the full thing until for this. And then I found out that there's a special edition that has extra scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I didn't think Ray was done. I thought she was still going.
You just had a close encounter.
What's
The cat kind. There you go.
Yeah. So with the movie, I remember seeing it like again, bits and pieces all over the years. I know I've watched it full through a few times, but it's been at least a couple decades, I would say. I think 15, 20 years since I've watched it. And so it was interesting watching it again today because I was like, okay, I don't remember it beginning that way. Maybe the versions I saw like before began differently. So I don't remember the airplanes in the beginning.
Oh.
All the old airplanes showing up. I don't remember that. So, and then there's little things here that I was like, I don't remember that. Was that in it before or this a different version? And then there's other things that I remember differently. So it was interesting. It's been a long time. Then there's other things that are very iconic, like the whole thing with the little boy being abducted. That is like just drilled into my mind. That was one of those things. I don't know, maybe it like resonated with me because I was always like wandering around on my own and I ran away a lot as a little kid. So maybe I felt like identified with Barry. I'm like, I'm taking off. I'm going to go have some fun with aliens or something. I don't know. But I don't know. That always stuck in my head. And then, of course, there's always the mashed potato scene and then the giant sculpture thing he did, which I, of course, growing up thought was cool because I liked sculptures. So I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. I don't know if I'd do that to my living room, but so yeah. I think that's really my experience with it.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the special editions and stuff like that. This is like Spielberg's Apocalypse Now or his Star Wars, where he keeps kind of meddling with it. He's gone back to it and he's added new things. I think for the special edition where you get to see the inside of the ship, which I don't like that version. Like we don't need
It doesn't
to see
either.
it. Yeah, it doesn't need to. We don't need to see what it looks like. It's all about the wonder and kind of takes. And of course, they did that. Like Spielberg had to promise, oh, if we re-release this, I have to do this to kind of give you a hook to kind of hang it on. And then he's I think there's been at least 3 different versions. So he like cut down the middle part, which everybody kind of agrees is kind of goes on a little too long, with Roy kind of losing his mind and throwing the dirt into the house. And then he added stuff back in. They reshot new stuff. They reshot that great forced perspective shot of the ship in the desert, and you see the helicopter land in the background. That's a miniature ship, and they just had the helicopter land further back, and the people like walk further back, and it's very convincing. Again, it's not there's no CG or anything like that, enhancements. And that's the kind of stuff
Mhm.
that, again, the building blocks of things that make it impressive.
Yeah.
So again, I had everybody watch, I think, the 137-minute, which is called the collector's edition. I think that's the best
Yeah.
version because it kind of tightens everything and makes everything work. But obviously, I wanted to talk about the movie as a communication, like a study on communication. I think that's wow, just watching it this time and just seeing it from that perspective, it just really hammered that message home for me. But talking about maybe some of the more aesthetic choices, things like that. Jonny, what about is there anything in the acting you wanted to point out? We want to go through the actors here. Just to start.
Sure. Well, I'll mention Terry Garr first because she's kind of been something I've seen a lot of recently.
Yeah.
We recently watched Mr. Mom, and then having watched The Black Stallion, and now this one. So we can talk
More
about
cherry market.
Yeah, like we mentioned before in Black Stallion, she's a good actress. I think she does hold her own, and she's good. There was that one scene where the blow up happens with the family where he's going crazy. He's in the shower. The kid comes in, starts banging the door and yelling at him, and then she at the beginning of the scene, she's trying to calm him down and trying to reason with him, and then she just loses it. And I remember feeling like there was no like build up to that. Like it almost just kind of happened, like because it was supposed to happen in the scene, and it didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel like, okay, she's really upset here. It felt like, okay, she's just yelling because she was told to yell. And I always hated that in movies where actors just yell because they think they have to or because they think the scene requires it. If you don't have emotion behind that yelling or screaming, it falls flat. And so during that whole her freaking out, I was like rolling my eyes, like, okay, stop now. That's enough of the screaming. And so even though I like her as an actress, I thought that scene was weak. And that
Yeah.
scene was kind of like jarring for me. But
Yeah.
and
Okay.
anybody have any thoughts on
Well, I
Terry?
have my thoughts, but Ray
Okay,
and
go.
Ruth, did you want to add anything?
Okay.
Well, I noticed something that like later, like the next scene when he really does go nuts and starts throwing dirt and plants and garbage cans and garbage and bricks into their kitchen through the window, she's calm. No, so when she grabs the kids and puts them in the car, she's still not like panicky, freaky out. She's kind of like, we're just getting in the car. We're going, we're leaving. And I feel like she should have freaked out then. That seemed like the moment where she should have been like all screaming and crazy and nuts and all freaking out at him because he's really going nuts now. Before he was just sitting in the shower with his clothes on, crying, and he wasn't even that nuts before. But today he'd gotten worse, a lot worse. So I don't know. I guess if I directed this, I would have asked her to like bring back in the previous scene and then like let go here before she leaves the movie. So that would have been the moment to like freak out. But
Yeah. So what I thought of when I saw her, when I watched her. So first of all, I do all the I watch all the making of and behind the scenes stuff. And Spielberg saw her in a commercial and thought she was funny. Like that was why he was like, let's get her.
the character doesn't need to be funny though.
It doesn't. It doesn't. He just thought she was funny, and so he's like, yeah, let's see if we can get her. And and so part of me kind of thinks like maybe she wasn't the right pick for that spot. Maybe another actress might have been able to pull from their own motherhood or their mom when they were kids. I don't know. But when I was watching it, like I've been the mom. I may be a little bit dramatic sometimes. And I am the mom that's like, hey guys, let's please just go outside. Okay, and then I just hit I flip a switch where I'm like, shut up, get out. Like I have those moments. I've been that mom, and so I kind of get that when she's like, look, I'm trying to be cool. Also, get out. Like I've been there. And I think what she was going for, or maybe what Spielberg was going for with her reaction to she's done. Because when he takes her out in the middle of the night, and he's like, we're gonna go look at the stars, we're gonna go look at the sky. And at one point she's like, I'm taking this really well, huh? Like she's like, don't you love how well I'm taking this? Because she's like, dude, I am trying. You are bat crap crazy, and I am trying. And I think at that point she's like, he's done. We're done. I'm done. I'm out. and she had there was no more freak out because you know what? I'm gone. Like that's what I took from her character. Whether or not she was maybe the best pick for that, I don't know that I'm prepared to say, but that's what I gleaned from that character.
I can
Mhm.
see that when you put it that way. My only issue was I didn't feel like there was the emotion behind the screaming. Like I didn't feel it. And if you don't make me feel it, then it's empty. You know what I mean? I had to feel it along with you. So as a
Mhm.
viewer, it's like if the actor can't portray the emotion, even though she's telling you she's screaming, I didn't feel the emotion behind it. And so it's like, okay, she's yelling and screaming, but like, where's the emotion?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I like that we're all offering different perspectives. From my perspective, everything that she does seem I've had that happen. I'm obviously not the most attentive person. I like to think that I am, but I'm not. What one of the notes that I have here is Roy at the very beginning. He's already distant. He starts the movie distant from the family. Like he's not there. Like he flat out tells the kid, "I don't want to help you with your homework. It's not my job to help you with it." And then he's talking to the kid in a way, and they talk about and then Ronnie comes over and she's like, "I thought you said you were going to take the kids to a movie," and he's talking about Pinocchio and all this stuff. And Johnny, you talked about the part where the kid's in the background. But anyway, he basically says Pinocchio, and he says to the kid, like, you want to live to be 10, we're going to go see Pinocchio. And she says, "Oh, that's a great way to get your kid to do that." And he says, "Okay, I did it wrong. Me, it's wrong, Roy," right? And then that's when he yells at the kid. And Ronnie already has that part where she sits down and she's pissed at him, right? You can tell there's a history there. And then when he
Mhm.
does this stuff and he comes back from and she doesn't understand what he's doing, obviously, which is he doesn't even understand it, right? Roy doesn't understand why he's become obsessed. So at the point there's already some tension in the family is what I got. And what I've experienced in my own life is I think things are just hunky-dory when I've actually missed stuff and I'm not paying the kind of attention. And then my wife will rightly she gets fed up, right? It's like, "I can't take this anymore. You're not listening. I'm tired of just ignoring the problem." So I agree with Johnny, that part where they're yelling, it's very shrill. That's a note that I had. It's very shrill. And I get what they're doing. It's more about the communications. The nobody's listening. They're just yelling and nobody's really hearing. Right. And I just think that the buildup, I agree that I don't buy the emotion because I think it's the point of we need to do this right here. Right. This is what needs to happen here. And they go for it. And it's raised to an 11. But from an emotional standpoint, I understand where she's coming from because he's lost his job. He's already inattentive. When she's telling him, we used to come up here and we used to look at each other, and now you're looking to the skies. You're obviously distant, right? So they have
Mhm.
that whole breakup scene. And again, what happens is she goes and she sleeps with the kids because he falls asleep by his model, right? And she goes and she sleeps with the kids. Again, what's happened in my life is we have our arguments, and then my wife will get to a point where she has her quiet and she's able to sit back and she's able to process what's happening. So I get that, like, you want to have the upsetness, but I think I got from what Ray is saying, it's like she's already thought through this. She's done. Like, she wakes up that morning, and the fact that he goes crazy, it's like, yeah, I knew it. Like, this is it. And so that's when she leaves. To me, it just felt very natural from an emotional standpoint because I've witnessed that. I've caused people to react like that, where it goes from a 0 to an 11 within seconds. And I don't understand what's happening because it's all on me, right? I wasn't there. I was distant. I didn't. So I get what everybody's saying, but for me, it seemed very natural, at least from a narrative standpoint, is that it's just all these things have been building and there's no controlling it. There's no gradual explosion. It just kind of happens in the moment. I don't know. So I felt all that. But like we talked about, it can be different perspectives just from the lives that you led. Anything else but Terry Gardner? We want to talk about Dreyfus?
Yeah, let's go to Dreyfus. Why not?
Okay. What do you think, Johnny?
Well, I like him. I've always liked Richard Dreyfuss. We talked about him a little bit before, but I like he's very natural on screen. He has a look. You watching him, I become engaged. You know, I want to see what he's going to say next. I kind of like lean into the screen when he's on camera. I don't really have anything negative to say about it. I think he's a great actor, and I liked his performance in this one.
Yeah. Ray?
So, okay, so he's working with Spielberg on Jaws, right? And Spielberg is talking about this UFO story, and Dreyfus is reading through some of the stuff, kind of helping him actually like develop. And he keeps saying, "You should have me do that." and he's changing the character. Like he's telling Spielberg different, like, you know what? No, he should be an everyman. Like he shouldn't be like I don't know. He's kind of giving Spielberg all of these like pointers on this character, and Spielberg's like, right, your guy would be like that. Let me tell my story. And then by the time they finish up with Jaws, Dreyfuss is like, you know that it's me. You know this is me. Roy's me. And Spielberg, I forget how many it was, but it was something like, it was like 5, 6, 7 other guys. He's like, maybe this guy, maybe that guy. And
I think Steve
every
McQueen
time,
was one of those guys.
yeah,
At least one of
yeah.
that, yeah.
And every time Dreyfuss would be like, no, because he's too authoritative. No, he's a pretty boy, and you need it to be like a normal guy. Like this is not like this guy. It's just regular Joe Schmo, you know. Oh no, because he's super busy right now. Like he had a reason that none of these other guys could do it. And eventually Spielberg's like, all right, fine, you wore me down. And Dreyfuss was like, I was prepared. He's like, I was looking around. Who else could he choose? And how can I tell him not? Because this was mine, you know? And then he says that when he went to write, because something I love about this and Jaws and all of my Spielbergian things, he's very low tech. Yeah, I noticed you use that term, by the way, which I love. But he's very low tech. He uses the giant puppets and the forced perspective, and mostly because they didn't really have like the CG like what we think of it today. But even like when it's you're seeing their face as the light just shines on them, and your imagination fills in the gap. I actually didn't like so much when they would have the glowing orb shooting down the street or whatever, because you didn't even need it. Like you know, but Dreyfuss was like, if I ever write a book, I'm going to title it, Do You Know What I'm Looking At Yet, Stephen? Because it was always, look over there. No. Okay, over. Like they didn't even have like the tennis ball thing. They were just like, look off this way. No, too high, too low, you know, like whatever. And Dreyfuss was like, at first that was really hard to act out, like when you never saw the shark, or you never saw the thing in the sky. You know, suddenly there was just a light shine, and they said, look immediately behind the light, because you can't look right at the light because it'll blind you. So look right after the light, and it'll look like you're watching the thing go by. And he's like, this is crazy. This is, you know, but he's like, it actually made them become better actors because they actually had to act. It was, it's like, you had mentioned in the Black Stallion, the giant spans of no talking, and you had to emote, and you had to act, and you couldn't depend on dialogue all the time. And that was a lot of like there's a lot said in this movie, and a lot of good stuff, and a lot of stuff that is just a cacophony of noise, and you know, which is also on purpose. But a lot of the acting is reacting to something that the viewer, the movie watcher, is never supposed to see. And Dreyfuss credits Spielberg with making him a better actor because he was always having to, I need to convince the audience that I see a spaceship or whatever. I like that. I like that he took something like this that could just be a UFO movie, and he like honed a craft out of it. So
Right. Ruth, what do you think?
I thought Dreyfuss was really good in this. I think it's one of my preferred older roles of his. He did crazy well, but same time you still related to him. You still understood why he was crazy. It was the right amount of crazy. Like he wasn't like all over the top crazy, but like you got his frustration because he doesn't want to act this way. He doesn't want to be crazy and drive his family nuts, but he can't help it that this happened, and like he can't get out of his mind. So I felt like he's very believable in this part. I guess it makes sense if he helps write it, essentially, by whispering in Stephen's ears. That, makes a lot of sense. And I think he definitely does fit the bill as an everyman.
Well, you mentioned a word, everyman. When I think of everyman, I think of Dreyfuss, just because I grew up with him. Obviously, Jaws was the first movie I fell in love with, and he does a good job in that. And I think I love that he's able to kind of know the character before they even filmed it. What's great about this, again, Roy is already distant from the family. There's a problem to begin with. You get that something's off. He and Ronnie are never on the same page, right? It really comes down to that part where they're on the mountaintop and they're kissing, and Roy opens his eyes to look up, but he's not thinking about her, right? The obsession is kind of taken in. And again, like you said, Ruth, it's like he pulls off that crazy, and you can feel there's an arc. You can feel that he doesn't know what's happened, even though he says it a couple of times, I don't know what's happening to me. You can feel that in his performance, and I think that really works. And again, he's likable. You like him enough that it's kind of okay that he abandons his family and his kids at the end to get in the spaceship. And again, Spielberg has said he wouldn't have shot it that way, but that's the arc. He's got to discover her, and there's stuff that he just can't figure out. I just thought that he kind of managed those very well.
I always thought it was weird towards the end, like when they're at the Devil's Tower, and Barry's mom, whose name I suddenly forgot.
Jillian.
Yeah, how like they suddenly like kiss and whatever, and I'm like, what? That doesn't fit. Except that it does, because like you said, like he and his wife, it was already, they were never in sync, they were never in line, and this woman gets it. And also
from the instant they meet, they're on the same page.
Yeah, they have that connection, they get it, they have a shared experience that literally changes their entire lives. And also there's kind of that sense of like, if I was gonna potentially go like die or jump on a spaceship or whatever, like, yeah, if I'm like, this could be it, have a connection with the person you have a connection with, and you kiss the girl or whatever. It bothered me because I'm like, ugh, but also you're married, except she left because of all of this. So I'm like, oh, okay, for this, that did make sense. It just kind of bothered me that it was just out of nowhere. It was like, oh, hey, you're a girl, I'm a guy. Like
also, like, I don't think it's so much of a sexual kiss. I think maybe it was more of a like,
goodbye.
Well, yes and no. I think he didn't know at that point he was going to leave. So I think it was more camaraderie, and like, she understands, they're sharing this amazing moment, and he appreciated her and her understanding, and he understood what she's going through. And it felt less like a romantic or sexual kiss and more like all this emotion built up, and he's just excited to have somebody understand and to share it with.
We're going to come back to this word, communication. What's fantastic is they've got a bond from the instant they meet, right? And they're able to talk to each other in a way that Roy and Ronnie can't. And I like the touch at the end that even though they have, like, Roy has to get down there. He's like, I have to get down there, right? And she's like, I don't have to get down there because my son isn't. They have different motivations, but they're still able to communicate with each other in a way that they understand each other. And I thought that was great. That whole, and like we said, we'll come back to it. That whole last half hour is about everybody finally on the same page. I guess Melinda Dillon, since we're talking about Ronnie, if we want to talk about her really quick. Obviously, we know her from A Christmas Story. Johnny, what did you think about her performance?
I thought she was good. That was one thing that I wanted to say is when she first came on screen, I was like, I recognize her, but I didn't know from where. And it wasn't until like later on, I was like, oh, it's the Christmas Story mom. That's who she is. I thought she was good. I liked her better than I liked Terry Garr in this one. Just that you feel that the mom, yearning to find her son. You feel that, and she portrayed that very well. And so I was on board with her. I wanted her to get back to her son. So I think acting wise, she pulled it off and she did a really good job.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that she kind of looks like his wife. So maybe that's the other reason, she's his type. So
he's got a thing for blondes. Ray, what did you think? We'll go to
so yeah, I liked that. Like I said, I don't need to be told. You don't need to tell me I'm worried about my son. Like, show me. And I like that she kind of had that like when the toys were going off and things were going crazy. And at first she's just mom and she's just tired and she's like, what in the world? And then she very quickly goes, this is not right. And like there's like that instant change that the mom intuition or whatever, maybe it's just everybody, maybe everybody would have that intuition because something is weird, but that the whole way through she has this level of like, I don't feel right, this isn't, and she doesn't have to say it, you just feel it, and everybody thinks she's crazy and she's like, maybe I am, that doesn't stop it from being true, like you know. And then when her son goes missing and she knows what happened, she knows who took him, and she also knows that no one is going to believe her even though she is willing to tell anyone, right? And then she disappears for a little while and she becomes obsessed and she's drawing the tower or painting the tower. No, she's drawing it, I don't know.
Yeah, she's drawing
but making the images of the tower. And I don't remember if it was her or Spielberg or who, but they were saying that they gave her the backstory of maybe she goes to her parents' house, and that they actually started to film a little bit of her at like parents' house in Oklahoma or whatever. And they ultimately didn't use it. But just where do you go when all you have in your world is your son who is gone because of aliens and no one believes you, and you're also having this like mental obsession with a landmass that you don't even comprehend, like this is crazy, every element about this is crazy, and also she doesn't care about any of it, she's like, screw the whole world, I just want my son back. Where do you go? You go to mom and dad because there is nowhere else for you. And so the concept that she just sort of disappears and then figures out to go to the tower makes sense, because that's how she took that and she internalized it, and she's like, so when she's like going crazy about the Devil's Tower or whatever, that's what she kept thinking of, is like, if I had lost my son and I knew that I needed to go to this, where is this? Like, how would I be reacting to that? So
Well,
I like that she took that and she carried it with her throughout, acting what might be kind of difficult to act out, just going crazy, you know?
well,
Mhm.
everybody's having the same kind of visions and the same obsession. We get that from the script and what Lacombe is saying, stuff like that. We're seeing what Neri is going through. So to show her going through the same thing would be superfluous, would be redundant, right? Even though we want to see that, but you get the sense full on that she's going through the same thing. She's drawing instead of sculpting. She's getting to the same place that Roy is getting to. I just think that visually you see when it cuts back to her in that hotel and she's got the drawings all over, you're like, oh, she's going through the exact same thing that Roy's going through, right? I love that reveal. Ruth, what did you think of her performance, Linda Dillon?
I thought she was really good. I always remembered her being very believable. That she really lost her son, and like her whole reaction to the aliens trying to break into her house. First off, I have a lot of confusion and questions about that whole thing. Like, so we don't see the aliens until the end, like actually see them physically. And because of that, it almost feels like the spaceships themselves are alive. And I can't help but wonder if Batteries Not Included was inspired by this movie,
Yeah.
because spaceships themselves are the beings. Um, but then somehow they get underneath the house and somebody's unscrewing the vent, which was always stuck with me. I always thought that was really creepy. But it was like, what was the plan? Because no arms come up and grab him, just smoke. And it's like, okay, so what is the plan here? And the other thing is, the first time that the kid noticed the aliens, did an alien come into their house and ransack the fridge?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
And when
It's
he
a,
goes off into the woods,
there's
he's following aliens.
yeah, there's a weird obsession. E.T. does that too. E.T. like is fascinated with the refrigerator.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah,
Yeah, so I thought she was good.
she's again kind of an every woman performance. She's
Yeah.
got that. She any like this is she. I think she embodies anybody. Like you recognize her just from her actions. Like she seems very real. Like
Mhm.
obviously it's taken from slice of life. So two more actors I don't want to talk about to mention. Francois Truffaut. Let's talk about him really quick. Johnny, what did you think of his one and only? Obviously Francois Truffaut, we want to mention, very famous director. He's one of the guys that the proponents of the auteur theory, where it's the director that kind of is the voice of the movie. And Spielberg wanting him, I think he offered him the part and didn't expect him to take it, and he did, even though he didn't think he was a good actor. Johnny, what did you think of Truffaut's performance in the movie?
He's the French guy, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Obviously.
It's a French name.
He was fine. I don't know. I kind of felt like I didn't care much about him, personally. When he was on screen, I didn't care. But I thought he did a good job. But I still didn't care. It was weird. It's weird to say that, but it
You
was
don't
kind of
want French
okay, this
people.
guy again. Yeah, I didn't. I kind of wanted to get past his scene.
He does what he needs to. He's there doing what he needs to
Yeah,
do.
I mean, he did his thing. He did the whole, hand thing, whatever.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Ray, what do you think?
So that's the like do, re, mi, whatever. Like that's his
Yeah.
thing. He's doing the like re, mi, do, whatever. Like that
Yeah.
was the whole hand thing.
Yeah, the
Which
Zoltan Kodaly, I think, is the guy.
Yeah, which I remembered from junior high choir. Like they had us doing that all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I liked that it gave you the sense of this is the whole world. Because this was just, what was it? Where were they? The Devil's
Muncie.
Dogs in Wyoming, but
Mhm.
Roy was over
They're
here.
Muncie, Indiana.
Yeah, Indiana. That's right.
Miranda.
And so it feels very localized if that's all it is, but that's not all it is. Like it's the whole world. They're all seeing something. He's like you've got the plane, like you said, the planes from the Bermuda Triangle, flight 19, right? And they end up in the desert, and we don't have any bodies or whatever. And then the ship that's out in the middle of nowhere, and and then you've got this French man like running all over the world trying to solve these issues of high strangeness, and I think it's so Truffaut actually, he did not speak English well, and practically not at all. And he really did not want to do in the when he's giving that seminar or whatever, he's like giving that I don't know, big public
Demonstration.
thing. Yeah. And he has the line, I forget it exactly now, but it's something like, "Oh, my English is not so good," or "Don't I speak English well?" He like says something about how he says, he did not want to do that. He's like, "I am so bad at the English language. I don't want to be a mockery, and I feel like I'm mocking myself." And then someone had pointed out to him, it might have been Dreyfuss, I don't remember. Somebody on set had pointed out to them, "Well, that's the American way, so we will appreciate you." And he's like, "Okay." But the line, "They belong here more than we," like when he says it, "They belong more than we," no one could figure out what he was saying.
Yep.
He
What
knew
are you
what it was.
saying?
He knew what it was, and Spielberg knew what it was. I don't think it was in the original script. And one of them, the two of them were talking together, and one of them said, "At that point, I feel like your character, like this character would realize this is their story. This is not our story." The line,
Yeah.
"They belong here more than we," like he practiced that so many times. Nobody knew what he was saying. The kid had a very different experience from this guy because Truffaut would 40 takes doing the exact same thing, and in the end they're like, "It's probably fine." And also his translator, they were like, "Oh, do you speak French?" And he's like, "Yes." The guy that plays the
Bob
translator,
Balaban, yeah.
yes.
Yep.
He's like, "Sure. Parlez-vous français?" And so they were like, "Okay, great." And then
Yep.
he's like, "Oh crap.
Now I have to learn
I have
French.
to actually speak French." So Truffaut was like, "That's okay, because I don't speak English, and here I am speaking English. So you and me, we're gonna do fine."
Well, the funny story is when he says they belong here more than we, like people thought he said they belong here Mozambique. And so they drew up shirts, and they had crew members wear shirts that said they belong here Mozambique. Just to make, and I think he took that in stride. He thought that was funny because obviously, like you talked about, he wasn't comfortable with himself. Ruth, what do you think of Truffaut?
I liked him. I feel like he's sort of like the grounded character in the movie. So he feels sort of like the spiritual connection. Like he feels like he's not driven crazy by this, but he's obviously a scientist. He's very smart, but he's also very I don't know, he seems very lovable. And I don't know if it's him being French kind of helped with that, make him feel like he had a certain like authority or certain like almost like a fatherly feel about him, where he felt like he was kind of the person sort of watching over this whole thing.
He was the adult in the room.
Yeah.
It felt like, you know, I feel like it's important to have him. I feel like he adds a lot to the story. I think also helps just having. It's interesting having him be French because it makes him. He's sort of an outsider already, but then he's also investigating outsiders, and so like he can identify sort of with somebody else coming to a different place and not being from there and trying to communicate. So I think he gets that. I always really liked that he appreciated that these people that showed up came there for a reason, that they're supposed to be there, and it's like they were invited. I'm kind of disappointed that nobody else got off the airplane besides those three. I mean, it sounded like he's gonna be like, get everybody off the Drax is gonna get everybody off the helicopter and be like, hey, let's storm the castle and let's storm the mountain and go see the aliens. And just like one other guy comes with them, and I was like, I would have gone.
Chicken.
But
It kind of feels like that old like many are called but few are chosen kind of feeling. Like
yeah.
You know, everybody had the opportunity. Everybody that witnessed, because it's the people that witnessed the flyovers and that heard the song and whatever.
The believers, yeah.
Yeah. And
they got that far.
They were all given the message, and out of all of them, a handful of them actually got there, and out of that handful, 3 of them
got close,
were committed, like, you know.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said, Ray, about it's the world. So having a Frenchman there, having Truffaut there, gives you the impression that this is happening all over. What I've loved about his performance is it's very refreshing. He's not the stereotypical guy. You've got the Major Walsh or whatever, who's the hardened government type that has all the plans, and no, we're still going to gas him, and we got to do that. And Lacombe is kind of just standing back, kind of bemused by it or amused by everybody. I love that he's like, yeah, but these people are having this vision. We shouldn't discount this. It's a very refreshing performance that he's not like the hard ass or the hard nosed person. He's all for the wonder, but he knows that he's not really in charge. He knows that the government has to take control. He knows that they can't just have people wandering in and out, right? Because they're going to get stuff. He's in the middle. But again, there's that shot when he sees Roy and Jillian and the other guy, I can't remember his name. And yeah, when he sees them, and there's that great shot through the window where you see Devil's Tower and the reflection, but you also see them running, and he just has a look on his face like, yeah, like this is great. Like, let them do this, right? I love that he's kind of open to that wonder. So I love all that stuff. But again, just going back, I guess the next, Ray, you mentioned Cary Guffey. They called him One Take Cary. Yep. Because he would get it. So Ray, obviously, I think you've got some behind the scenes stuff. But before we talk about that, Jonny, what did you think of, especially since covering Black Stallion and Kelly Reno and how expressive he was? What did you think of Cary Guffey in the movie?
Yeah, he was okay. I thought he was fine.
Okay.
He's a little kid.
Yeah, he's a little kid.
Well, just be Ray. Obviously, I want to know what you think. But one of the notes I have here is like Kelly Reno. I think the word wonder was created for this boy's face because he just has. There's just something about his face where you just believe everything that he sees, and he's just kind of and I think it's because he's 5, maybe, that he's just kind of more innocent. But Ray, what did you think of Guffey? And I'm guessing that you're going to have how Spielberg is able to elicit that performance from him.
Yeah, so I want to hear what Ruth has to say, because I do want to. I feel like I might be like behind the scenes sometimes takes away the magic. So I kind
luster,
of want to
yeah.
hear what.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. I I really like his performance. I always felt like he was extremely convincing. Obviously, he's like, it's believable that he saw something. Like, you don't think that he's looking at, oh, look over here, look over that. You get a sense that he's actually excited about something really happening and actually seeing something. And he always conveyed that really well. And I definitely have to agree with you. He has a wonderful face for expressing excitement and like awe. And I don't know, he's just so adorable and cute that I think in some ways it makes it even more heartbreaking when he gets stolen away. But at the same time, like you try to see it from his perspective as a little kid, he's like, oh, this is a big exciting thing. He's not even thinking about, oh, they're going to take me from my mom. He's not even thinking about his mom being upset. He's just thinking, I'm going to go see these guys. They want to go play ice cream. And like, I love just his simplicity about the whole situation. He just saw it as something exciting. He didn't see anything scary or terrifying going on. Even when they were trying to break in the house, he's like giggling and laughing about all the stuff that's happening. There's terrifying, scary things like dishwashers freaking out and like knives falling off of things. It was nuts. And he's not scared at all. Meanwhile, the mom's freaking out. But I think he conveyed that sense of wonder and that sense of excitement of, the possibility of the unknown. It doesn't have to be scary. And he thought is like this joyful, fun thing.
Well, he knew kids know things, right? He knows like that they don't mean any harm. Just intrinsically, he knows that.
Yeah.
I will disagree a little bit. I did actually believe or think while I was watching his performance that he was being directed and guided and shown, look over here, look at this, making him laugh off camera, making him see something that was, give like this wonder type face. So I saw that and I thought, okay, he is being kind of led to react these ways. I don't think it was a performance thing. I think it was just he was naturally reacting to what he was seeing off camera.
Well, the way he was being directed, and Ray will give it to you at this point, but the reaction that he's giving is a genuine reaction. He's not being told to act a certain way. Spielberg is getting the performance from him so I agree with both of you. It's like he's being directed, but he's very natural in how he reacts to stuff. Ray, what did you think?
Yeah, so so like I said, I had seen it several times in bits and pieces in my youth. And so I actually watched the behind the scenes stuff before rewatching it for the podcast. And so I kind of knew this going in, and so I would watch for specific things sometimes. And yeah, with him, like you said, they called him One Take Carrie. And because so when they were casting it, they had this kid that was similar in look and age and everything, and he seemed oddly polished. Like he was a good kid and a good little actor, and they were like, wow, he's going to be easy to work with because he gets direction already. And then they also had Carrie in there, and he was just a kid, and he was good-natured, and he also took direction well, but he wasn't polished. And Spielberg was like, that's who I want to work with. I want to work with the kid that just naturally does the thing. And so they were like, let's do a couple of scenes. Let's see how this goes. And so he doesn't really have a script. Like they would tell him, like, you're going to run from here and you're going to stop right here. Like when you see the kitchen all messed up, like they told him, they had a little mark like they do. And they're like, you're going to run and you're going to stop on this little line and you're going to look at the stuff and you're going to just see what happens. Like they were like, just look at the stuff and then just see what happens. And so he's like, okay. And so when he runs out, it was one take. He runs out, you see him like actually stop on the line. Like he looks down at his mark, which works because he's like, what the? And he's looking down, and then they had somebody step out in I think it was a gorilla suit first. Somebody steps out in a gorilla suit. And so that's why, like, you see him look up and he's like, and you can see him start to get kind of scared, and he starts to back up. And then they have somebody off to the side step out in like a clown suit or something that he goes, okay. And he's still kind of confused, but he's like, this is a fun thing. gorilla clown equals fun, you know, and that was it. And that they were like, we got it, you know. And he did that a lot of times when they had him like looking out the window and he looks up and he says, toys. Like that was not a line. Spielberg is literally on a scaffolding, I think, or a ladder. And he's like, slowly opening this like package and he goes, oh, toys, because Spielberg pulls out toys out of a box, you know. And they actually were inspired by that because they didn't know what their spaceships looked like yet. They didn't know what their aliens looked like yet. And so when you actually start to see the things that are flying around, like they have like one that looks like a Volkswagen bus or something, or like looks like a bus. They have another one that looks like a cassette tape or whatever. Like they like have things that look like things because like maybe he saw a spaceship that looked like toys, like, you know, like that was kind of, they wanted to pull that because because that was how he reacted. And also the friends, like when he gets off of the spaceship, apparently he was wearing ballet slippers and he hated it. That's why
so he wouldn't slip on the
and you see him like kind of react weird, like almost like he doesn't want to do it because he didn't want to do it because he didn't want to walk down in the ballet slippers. But it looks like he doesn't really want to leave his friends. And then when they're like, okay, they have to go goodbye, they have to go bye-bye or whatever. And he's like, they're going goodbye, friends, you know, and he starts to cry. That was not because he'd done this whole movie with a bunch of grown-ups and gorilla masks, and you know, and now he's got friends. All those little, they were the little aliens. They're all little girls that are part of a ballet company, and so he had friends. He had like 1 day or 2 days of shooting with friends, and then she's like, he's like, do they have to go? The friends have to go. And he starts crying, which made her start crying, which made several other people on set crying. And they were like, just go, just keep going. That's great, you know? But all these little things that like, that was always his genuine response. He was told to go to there or, hey, look right here. But everything that he does, every reaction he has is perfectly genuine. And if it worked the first time, let's move on, because they didn't want it to be polished. They didn't want to be him acting. So for that, I think it's awesome. Child actors can kind of be the ruin of an otherwise excellent film.
Well,
and he wasn't.
They say that the worst things you can do is working with kids and animals, right? That's the hardest thing you can do.
Gosh. Well, I think that's part of what was so obnoxious about old films, like especially like 50s, 60s films, is it almost seemed like they purposely made kid characters obnoxious and annoying. And they were like the stereotypical thing, and the kid would overact like on purpose, and it wasn't natural at all. And yeah, I prefer, you know, letting the child just kind of act like a child. So yeah, he's very natural.
Well, I don't know of another director who works this well with kids as Steven Spielberg. Spielberg, because the joke is he's a kid himself, right? He's the kid that never grew up, which is why Hook seemed to be the perfect fit for Spielberg. I don't think it is. I think that's my least favorite Spielberg movie, but that was just an aside. But Spielberg is a kid inside, so he knows how to talk to these kids. I can't think of another director that's able to pull these naturalistic performances. You look at E.T. as well. The kids in that can be obnoxious. The fighting that they're having is obnoxious, but they feel so real, like they're your friends, like you've been involved in those conversations. The way he worked with Henry Thomas, the way he worked with Drew Barrymore, getting her to cry on, there's footage on E.T. of him sitting her aside and telling her stories. I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine your friends being pulled away, your family, your pet dying, and he would get a reaction, but he would leave it up to her. He left it up to Guffey to react. He didn't tell the kid how to react. He just got the naturalistic performance that he needed from the kid. And he did it in a way that was able to get that. I can't think of another director that's able to work with kids and have it be that pitch perfect and have them feel like kids. And it does help that Spielberg has that kid inside him. The thing too with the family life, and there's the same thing in Jaws. The way that it seems like chaos. The kids just yelling and screaming, and quiet talking and whispering and all this stuff. It seems very real in the way that like Altman in the 70s, he was able to get that overlapping dialogue. I think Spielberg is a master of getting the families. It feels just very genuine.
And
But
he did the same thing with those kids too.
yeah,
The older kid would have actual lines. The younger kids just were told, like, you're having dinner now and you're kind of not like, how do you act when you have dinner?
Yeah, and able to kind of have that guide. So yeah, again, Spielberg is a good wrangler of actors. But I guess before we leave the kind of acting table, Ruth, you had something to say about like actorly business that you wanted to talk about since we're kind of on the subject.
So here's my thing I've noticed is I get what you're saying that like he seems to be able to pull natural performances with little kids, but with some of the business, the things he has people doing to sort of seem like it's regular life is very unrealistic, that it almost feels like, does Steven hang out with other people? Because like, well, so the first thing that really stands out is the first scene with Roy's family. And I like the whole part where he said to the kids, well, I graduated. I don't have to do problems anymore. That's the whole point. Now it's your problem. I actually thought that was really funny. But then after that, like you have the other little kid suddenly shows up and climbs into the playpen, and they're obviously not the kid that should be in the playpen, and just start whacking this doll. And it's like, okay, that's a little weird. What's weirder is that nobody tries to stop him. And I don't know any parent that wouldn't do that. And I was like, yeah, if it was a little girl doing that, I can understand why they wouldn't stop her, because it's like, she's not going to listen anyway. She's a little girl. She's just playing, or she's just like in there shaking or being loud or crazy. It's a different situation than an older kid in there purposely mutilating a little girl's toy. Like, why wouldn't the mom get mad and be like, get out of there? Like, I think in the middle of trying to talk to the dad, she should have been like stopped and go, hey, stop doing that. Because that's just something you end up doing. Like, you're trying to focus on what's happening, but the kid over there is doing something crazy, because she doesn't react because they don't tell him to stop. And even the little girl doesn't react to the fact that he destroyed her doll. It's like, that threw me off. And I get that he's trying to create some, like, a semblance of family situation, but it made it hard for me to enjoy the good things that were happening because of the little random things that didn't quite work. So that's probably the worst moment for me.
It builds I get that it's building to that point where Roy yells at him, like, you're close to death. But you're right. It's like, it's so much. Like, a lot of that family stuff is very shrill. And so I agree with you there. It's like, it's unnatural to get to a certain point. So yeah, I absolutely understand what you're saying there. It doesn't quite work.
Yeah. On that same, like I was saying at the dinner table, like how you're talking about, like, this is kind of weird. And they were all talking and jibber jabbering. And like I said, the older boy was told to, like, you're gonna be like watching him being like, what is dad doing? Right? The younger girl, like when she's like, I hate mashed potatoes, there's a fly and whatever, like that was completely not expected. And originally the I don't remember if it was mom or if it was the older boy, but one of them was kind of like, shh, shh, this isn't here. And then and that's, you don't see that, you see them passing stuff around, but they're like, and then it was just so funny that even though they were like, all right, let's do that again, and Spielberg's like, actually don't.
It worked to fly. Yeah.
It was just so funny. But yeah, I personally, I understand it, but I agree with Ruth that, like, if I was the mom, even if I'm trying to talk to my husband and I'm like, dude, you can't just make him go to stop it, even if it does build to that, because I say stop it, stop it, stop it, and he doesn't stop it, and then he turns around and says, you're close to that, like, that's real, that would happen. But just completely ignoring him and then being like, I now pay attention to you, feels weird. And at dinner, a lot of the times, like, you're not going to just like jib jab jib 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 over each other the whole time. Like, you have a little bit of that, and then you're like, hey guys, cool it. What are you doing with your mashed potatoes? Like, like, it sometimes does feel like you hear the and action that sometimes I just feel like is too much to be real for me.
Well, that's what I'm talking about it being shrill. Like it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I get it, but now we're going to go on for like another 2 minutes, like of them screaming
Yeah.
at each other. It gets a little much. Johnny, we talked about the actorly stuff in The Godfather, how James Caan does the thing where he gets so upset that he bites his finger, right? It's like, oh, okay, you're kind of letting him go, and it's like, okay, I get it, but like that doesn't seem natural. You're a victim of your emotions, that kind of. I think a lot of 70s, like they want to have that kind of improvisational kind of acting going on, and we see that a lot, and we do see that here. And I do agree. I think that in E.T. the family stuff is more honed. I think that Spielberg kind of learned from that, and he's able to rein it in so it feels more. I never feel that it's shrill in E.T. I feel that it's very real, even though it happens a lot.
Yeah.
But
I
Ruth,
agree with you on that.
were there more things you wanted to add about the stuff, or was
So
that
sort of random things that did make sense to me, like the whole, like, I don't know if it was a press conference or a town hall meeting where they're at the big long table and like some authority figures, they show him the picture, this is a UFO, and then he's like, well, this is really just a disc that's in the air.
yeah,
And like they're trying to,
I think.
yeah, so but it wasn't done in a press conference kind of a way, because they're sitting at a table.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't feel like the people that were there would have been invited to be at the press conference. It would just be news people. Those guys wouldn't be there. They would be there if they like tried to get in, and then like they'd all be crowding trying to get into the conversation, but they would be sitting at a table invited to be a part of it, especially if they're trying to like, oh, nothing happened. That felt a little unnatural to me. Like, I do like some of the things that were said, but I think I would have liked it better if it had been an actual press conference kind of scenario, and everybody was just kind of trying to say something. I don't know. I think that would have worked a little better. I think it just threw me off having them at the table like that. Like, this isn't, the war council with the president.
Real quick, to add to what Ruth was saying about Spielberg's business for the sake of business, one thing that really bugged me was when Terry Garr is walking around the kitchen and she has this handful of stuff like a tennis racket and other things, and she just sets them down on the kitchen table and then walks over and picks up a skateboard and then walks out. I'm like, okay, this business makes no sense. And so it's distracting to watch a character on screen do business for the sake of business. Make sure it makes sense in the scene. Yeah, she might be frazzled in the moment of the scene, but don't be just walking around with skates and tennis rackets and dropping things on tables and then walking out with a skateboard. What are you doing? Like, I want to yell, scream, what? Why are you doing that? What's the point? You made a mess from here, now it's over there, and then you leave with the skateboard. What? Are you that frazzled you can't understand what you're doing with your business? Have it make sense with the scene. And so it was pissing me off. I was like, stop doing stupid business. So I wanted to make sure I said that.
Well, it's interesting because you've got this movie sandwiched between Jaws and E.T., right? Which I think Jaws again has the suburban family stuff, which is handled very, very well. There's a shot in Jaws that Ray, you and Ruth and I talked about, where it's Brody on the phone talking about work, and you see in the background his family also talking, and the dialogue is pitched at the same level to let you know on an audio visual level that it's mixed. Like the family isn't taking precedence over work isn't taking precedence over family. So it has a payoff later in Jaws where Brody says, like, take him home, and Ellen says, take him home where? And he says, home here, right? So it tells you that family is what's important. So again, it's visually, and there's a similar scene here where they're on the, before Roy goes out, right, to investigate, where they're on the phone and the family's in the background and they're pitched at the same level. So it's kind of similar there. I just think that it's odd because you'd think there'd be a progression, right? But it just seems to me that Spielberg is being experimental. Like he's trying things instead of like honing his craft. Because in Jaws and in E.T., it's very honed. Like it makes sense on that level. Whereas you're right. Like I can't disagree with you that why is she, it's business for the sake of business. Why would she do this? It doesn't make any sense. Like there's no sense to it. It's just something to do.
It's distracting. Right? I don't think it should fit the character, and it should be in the moment in the scene. It shouldn't be distracting.
But it's shrillness in the performance as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's a scene that I don't think they ever used it. I only saw it in deleted scene or extra scenes or whatever. I never saw it in any version of the movie that I'm so glad they cut, because it's when Roy goes into work and it's him like walking around with his supervisor or whatever, and they're like, they've got all the people in the background that are like working on stuff, moving papers and things, just moving around and being obnoxious, and all the like computers or whatever that are all around them. And then you get from it somebody's supposed to go out to the field. Also, for whatever reason, they can't, or they're somewhere else in the field or something. So they send Dreyfus, they're like, all right, it's you. And also fix it or you're fired. It's either a promotion or no job. Good luck to you. And I appreciate that, because then later when they're like, he lost his job, you're like, what the? Because he saw a UFO? Like, that's weird. And having that little hint that, like, either you're getting a promotion or you're walking away with nothing. Great, that's great. But it was so long, and it was so obnoxious the whole time. And it's the same thing where nothing is over another, and so you don't really understand why you just saw that scene. And then he goes out into the field, and it's another him walking around with a guy, they're looking at power lines being down or something, I don't know. And then at the very, like, you don't understand what's happening, the radio's going, the guy's talking to him, he's responding, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm supposed to pay attention to, and it actually is extremely distracting. And then he's like just you're the field manager now, good luck to you. And he goes and drives off, and then you see everybody turn to him, this random guy, and it's suddenly silent, and he goes, fix it. You know. And I loved that, like, that part, but I hated both of those scenes. I was so glad that when I watched the, I don't know, the theatrical the full version, that I didn't see those. I don't know if they got put into one of the others, maybe, but you couldn't glean what you needed to know out of it. And I understand, like, sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes you want it to be like, ah, did you catch that? But also, no one caught it. Like, you also are telling a story, and sometimes you need to be like, pay attention to this. Ah, are you paying attention? Pay attention to this. Ah, and there was just no balance. And so I was glad those scenes were at least not in the version that I watched.
To kind of go along with this, one more thing real quick. I did watch your guys' Jaws episode, so I know what was talked about. And I remember, Ruth, I think you guys were talking about the dialogue overlapping in the scenes. A lot of Spielberg movies do this, where he has characters talking over each other all the time, which is another thing that frustrates me. Like, I know it's real life to have people talk over each other, but when you're watching a movie, I have to be able to understand what the characters are saying and when. It's okay to do it once in a while, but the very first scene when they're trying to track in the ship on the radar, whatever they're doing, and there's three guys, and the camera keeps pulling back and revealing more characters, and they keep talking over each other. Not one person waits for someone else to stop talking before the next one starts talking. And I know this communication thing, I know all that, but man, oh man, to start a movie like that and to just get to it. It annoyed me from the very beginning. And I was like, am I going to have to listen to people talk over each other the entire movie? And so I was kind of like already on edge, like, no, I don't want to watch a movie where they all talk over each other all the time. I want the characters to take their turn and talk when they're supposed to talk, and not just this jumbled mess of, nothing. I don't know. It was frustrating. But Ruth, real quick, I know that bothered you too. So what do you think of it?
Are you talking about the scene where they're in, like, the traffic control?
Yeah. And yeah.
Or there was some kind of UFO, whatever, that almost ran into these planes, and then they asked them if they wanted to report it, and they're like, "No, I don't want to report that."
Yeah.
Is that you're talking about? Yeah, because you have the guy that's talking to the people on the airplane, and then you have the other guy that's, like, sitting right there, and he's talking at the same time, and, like, isn't the guy on the airplane hearing that too? Like, wouldn't that be distracting? And then suddenly have four people all talking, and that was a little confusing. Like, I don't think you needed that in the movie. And I don't think that was in the version I saw before. So, yeah, that was a little off-putting.
Like a play, you wouldn't do that in a play. And I think also in real life, we don't do that to each other. Maybe you do occasionally, but
the Harrisons do.
I don't think it's realistic. And so I have a hard time watching movies and Spielberg does it a lot. He always does it, and it's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Well, so what you're doing is you're basically disagreeing with the whole point of the movie.
Yeah, and I knew you were going to say that, because I knew the communication part.
Yeah.
But
Well,
man,
if it's like the point, he's doing it on purpose, that's different, but like it does also sort of give you a headache, or where you feel like you need to watch it several times to really get what everybody's saying.
The subtitles
And
had no idea what to subtitle. They kept jumping back and forth like, who
Yeah.
should we subtitle? I don't know.
Well, well, obviously we're going like really, really long, and I still want to be able to talk about the main point of the movie. But one of
Okay.
the things that's fascinating about this movie and about Star Wars, like we mentioned, is, again, it goes along with the point of the movie, the sense of discovery. There's a difference, I think, in special effects, especially today, where you have special, oh, look what I can do with special effects. Now let me build a story around those special effects, right? To me, when that happens, it's always a lesser kind of an empty experience, because I'm just getting that you're showing off, right? What's great about Star Wars and what's great about Close Encounters is it's Lucas and Spielberg saying, this is the story that I want to tell. Now, how do I get technology to help me tell that story, right? And
Yeah.
there's a real sense of discovery in these special effects. Obviously, you had ILM working on Star Wars, John Dykstra, that kind of thing. Here you've got Douglas Trumbull working on the special effects, who worked on 2001 with the model work. I just think that some of the story, like some of the cloud effects, he filled a tank full of salt water with lighter fresh water on top, and so then he injected paint to the top layer, so the paint billowed through the fresh water, but it flattened out at the top. So that smoke effect that they were able to kind of layer in, again, it's awe-inspiring because you hadn't seen them do that before. The special and with the model work and the light sources, and they're just trying to make stuff work, and there's a real sense of wonder to these special effects that, again, were it's like I said, it's odd that this came out the same year as Star Wars, because you've got this new kind of doors that are opening to FX and are trying to tell you new things to kind of complement that story. So, Ray, is there any like particular behind the scenes stuff? Say if you want to pick like 3 things to talk that impressed you about the behind the scenes stuff with the movie and how they got some of the technical aspects here.
I like low tech. I feel like it's more real. Those were real clouds because guess what? They were using water and paint and gleaning from nature how to create nature. And so I like that. I like real, like tangible things and like using the light and that kind of thing. But the miniatures, when you watch the behind the scenes stuff for the extras on Lord of the Rings, and they talk about their bigatures because they're miniatures, but they're still like entire studios of like a town this big, and that kind of thing was in the minds of creators because of the miniatures on this for the different like space ships and like seeing the entire bot, because they were like, if we show you just this little piece, there you go, and I only have to create this and like move it past the camera or whatever. But when you're seeing the entire under of the, or the entire top, is it the entire top of the spaceship, and they needed a whole like civilization right down to like teeny tiny little people that you don't actually see, but they needed to have it in there so that it felt real and visceral, like that was a real spaceship. Yes, people had used models before, but this was reimagining how to even create miniatures, including like all the smoke, how they would always have smoke. They actually would just have a room or a boxed in area, and they would have whatever in the smoke, and they would just leave the camera there and step out and let it do its thing, and then go in and see if they caught what they needed to catch. Nope, didn't catch. Okay, set it back up on the track and let's do it again, and it's so time consuming. But to me, I would rather see the spaceship than see what some guy created on the computer. It's cool, but I know that you created it on the computer. This was a real physical thing, which I feel like translates very well. I feel like today we would probably do that so much better with CGI. But the physical things, the physical like light shining on you, the physical spaceship being there. The only thing that I didn't like was the weird puppet spider alien. I didn't like it. It was clearly and obviously a marionette. Like,
Yeah.
that one I was not so sold on.
You could have
Everything
lost
else,
that part.
yeah.
So again, I absolutely agree. Like when they redid Star Wars with the special editions, it's like, yeah, I've seen the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. I know you can do this. It's not as impressive as being there in a theater in 1977 or 1980 or 1983 and seeing, yeah, you can see the boxes, like the matte boxes around, but I'm still caught up in that sense of wonder of them. Let's try this and see if it works. So even if it does, it's not 100% believable, there's still that sense in this movie in particular of them trying to see if it works. Like you said, Ray, they didn't know what the spaceships looked like, so they kind of had, Dreyfuss kind of look, oh, there it is. They didn't, and I think Dreyfuss was upset because he was like, if I knew what the ship looked like, I would have had a different reaction than what I gave, right? So there's a little bit of that disconnect. I just think, again, the whole movie is about the sense of discovery, like, and it's through the whole, you got these people that don't understand why they're trying to find this thing, why they're painting this tower, right? Roy keeps having these moments of lucidity where he breaks through. He's like, I'm okay now, and then he tries to break the tower off, and then it breaks, and that gives him a breakthrough, and that causes him to be extra crazy, right? So you have this sense of discovery. I love the part where they figure out that the numbers they're getting are longitude and latitude, and so they're like, well, how can we figure this out on a globe? And then the Balaban character says, I think there's a globe in this office, and you see the guys come in and they're all about, well, I think there's a pin underneath, and they get it out and they roll it and it's everybody working in tandem to get to this sense of discovery and get where they need to go, right? And I think that's kind of baked in for the whole movie. So I love that idea of the sense of discovery. So before we talk about the communication, we all give our kind of, there's the Spielbergisms, I guess you want to say. I would call this looking off camera in awe, the movie. I know that's a trope that Spielberg has, but this is the heaviest. It's constant people looking in a sense of wonder.
I don't know. I think Jurassic Park is pretty heavy in this too.
Jurassic Park is too, right? It's got a lot of the look off camera, and there it is, look at the ball, right? So there's a lot of that Spielberg stuff. Some of the and the way that he pulls this off, like you see Neary out and he's trying to figure stuff out, right? And he's in his truck, and it comes where he's at the stop sign, he's looking at his map, and then you see the truck come behind him, and there's, it's just a truck, and it passes like, you're in the middle of the road, that kind of thing. But it's cool that it's setting you up, because it does it again, and he stops at another stop sign, and you see another car pull up, and he does the same thing where he waves them on, and the way that the car lifts, I was like, holy crap. Every time I'm wowed by that. Number one, because you don't expect it, but number two, because Spielberg has set you up for it. There's another payoff later too, when you see all that group on the side of the mountain, how they're there to see the UFOs, right? And then when Roy goes back and he meets Julian there, right? And they have that other, so you expect when they start to see and the music builds and they see the spaceships coming, and you think it's going to be the same thing, except it's not. Now it's revealed that it's these helicopters that are trying to get them. So again, there's those payoffs there. Spielberg he doesn't just, so there's the part where Roy and Julian are on the side of the mountain, which I thought was very North by Northwest Hitchcockian. She's trying to copy that, but Spielberg also copies himself. Like in Jaws, you see the part where the shadow of the shark kind of goes under the boat, right? And in this movie, when Roy's out searching, you see the shadow of the ship going overhead, right? There's the like you said, Ruth, the press conference, which I agree with, it's confusing. Is this a press conference? Is it a town meeting? Whatever. That reminded me of the scene in Jaws where they have the town meeting, right? The thing with, and I agree too, like when Jillian's house is going crazy, right? It's like, well, why does this have to do with anything? How are the aliens underneath? Like, are they affecting things? Like, how does the vacuum cleaner going? It seems reminiscent of later Poltergeist, where if you look at Poltergeist, a lot of the stuff that happens in that movie is not what happens in a Poltergeist. It happens in Hauntings, but they just wanted to have it in there because it was cool, right? It reminded me of that. So you've got all these Spielbergisms, you got John Williams, obviously. So there's a lot of that stuff, and I'm just constantly wowed by a lot of the shots. There's that shot of Roy having that moment of lucidity where he's arguing on the phone with Ron. He's like, just come back, we'll figure it out. And you've got the shot of his model in the background, but then the TV also shows the actual Devil's Tower. And he's so busy arguing with Ronnie that he doesn't see on the TV. And so again, there's that communication kind of stuff. Just constant shots of stuff that only Spielberg could pull off, right?
Yeah.
So the final thing, obviously, what I love about this movie, it's not just about, it's about that sense of awe and wonder, like we talked about. It's about that discovery, right? That's layered all through the movie. It's kind of a religious experience. We have all these people coming together and kind of having that communal kind of look, and again, you're being sucked into something that's larger than yourself. I just thought that it was had religious imagery that was kind of tied in there. But you're right, Johnny. It's like the communication, sometimes it can be a little much. I get it if you're going for that point, but sometimes it's okay, I get that. Let's move on, right?
Yeah.
I just thought that looking at it, it's great that this movie is like, it's a constant thing. It's about interpreters, it's got sign language, it's got maps, it's got kids talking over their parents and vice versa. It's
Not
got,
music.
yeah, number patterns, it's got painting, right? One of the things that I love too, Spielberg didn't even know this. One of my favorite stories of the movie is at the end, we're building to this whole last half hour. I think no matter what you think of the rest of the movie, that last half hour is like transcendent to me, because now we've got everybody on the same page. I love that Spielberg was on. Have you guys ever watched Inside the Actor Studio with James Lipton when he was alive?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them.
He had Spielberg on, and he says, and we learned this in the Fablemans, obviously, but Lipton says to Spielberg, so your dad was a mathematician. You're a computer scientist, right? Your mom was a musician. How are they trying to communicate in the end, right? You've got computers that are using music to have a conversation. And Spielberg looked at him and said, I never thought about that. I'd like to say that I thought about that was my mom and dad, but this is the first that it occurred to me. So again, Spielberg is introducing this stuff. He doesn't know that he's doing it. Like, it's just intrinsic. And that's one of the reasons why he's my favorite filmmaker. But you know what I'm saying? This, and it ties in with the music too. It's all about, you know, the interpreters, like somebody speaking French in the beginning, somebody speaking Spanish. They can't understand each other. They bring out an interpreter, but he's more like, oh, I'm more of a map reader kind of thing, right? You know, you don't understand French. You don't understand, like, you've got the people in the desert, how they're singing the song. Like, that's how they're communicating, right? And it's all, like I said, it all builds to the ending. Johnny, we talked about in Black Stallion, I thought it was interesting watching this, how the music, it didn't really come together. You remember? How it just was these different, like, all of a sudden there's a banjo, all of a sudden there's woodwind. It's like, okay, this is nice, but it's not really tying in. What I loved from a music standpoint is the whole first 3/4 of the movie, I guess, there's a lot of tonal dissonance happening, right? There's all these, we're getting glimpses, we're getting When You Wish Upon a Star, we're getting the Close Encounters theme. There's obviously the scary stuff when Jillian's house is being attacked. My question is, whose perspective is that from? Because we know that the aliens, because the music is telling us that they don't mean harm, they're benevolent, but why all of a sudden are we getting this scary music when they're attacking the house? Do you guys have an opinion on whose perspective that scene is? Is it from Jillian's perspective, or is it the aliens' perspective? What do you think is going on there? Anybody want to talk about that?
I think that scene's Jillian, for sure, in my opinion. I think just because she's terrified, and some things she can't stop is trying to take her child. And like, why do they want this particular little boy? I don't know. Maybe because they thought he was cute and fun too. I don't know. But like, yeah, I would say from like the way everything is shot and the way everything is done, it's at her eye level. We're seeing the things that she would notice. I feel like it's from her perspective.
Excellent. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I was gonna say, so like I do this with my kids all the time, where like I mentioned it earlier, where I'll say, hold on, does anybody hear the music? What movie are we in right now? And because like we'll be doing something where we're like, it's like raining and we're all trying to get into the car really quick and I can't get the thing to unlock, and I'm like, okay, are we in Monty Python or are we in the latest slasher film? Like, you know, like, and I felt like there was kind of a lot of that in this movie. You're saying it's all about like communication and coming together. And that scene, there are a few scenes where the music tells you what you should be feeling.
Mhm.
And the only thing that was emoting at that moment, like in the house with everything going crazy, was the mom. Like the kid was mostly just like, whoa, what's going on? This is wild.
My friends are so funny. Yeah, my friends are being
yeah.
funny right now. Yeah.
The only emotion, which that was another thing where in order to not scare him, they kept doing like, they would be like, "Wah, wah," and then they started getting like more and more like urgent scream-y, so that when he did the scene with her, he was like, oh, it's our fun game.
Yeah.
Because the only emotion that you're seeing right now is the mom's world being ripped apart. And then ultimately her son going through the
Her hands.
yeah, well, which is funny because you can actually see when he's going out the doggy door, hands grab him and actually pull him out. That was his real mom. Because he didn't want to leave. He didn't like he knew that at a certain point he's supposed to, get down and this way, and go out the doggy door. But he got out and he got his face out and he kind of had a moment of like, I did it, and they're like, wow. I liked knowing that was there to look for it, to see that just that real flash of like someone yanked her kid out the doggy door. Like, all the more scary. Like it adds that extra level of terror because that's what she's feeling. And in other moments, like this could be a very romantic scene out, when they're out there and she says, oh, we used to look at each other. But the feeling is like do 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 do, what's out there? Like that's where your focus goes. And so that's what you're looking up at the sky too. What am I going to see? I like when music subliminally or sometimes just outright kind of tells you what to feel. But I also like when it's like, oh no, this is nothing. Gotcha. Sometimes I kind of like that.
Going back to the music, Jonny, the way that there's all this tonal dissonance with the music, like you're getting bits and pieces of things, that when they finally get to Devil's Tower and it's building this last half-hour section, that's when the music becomes symphonic. Everybody's on the same page in that point. I love that nobody's stopping Roy and Jillian from walking onto wherever they are, right? Because it doesn't matter at that point. They're all there to experience this together. They're all there for that religious moment. And the music is finally not everything that Williams's music has been doing to this point. It builds and it kind of crescendos and it joins with each other to build this beautiful segment to the point where, Roy gets on the ship, or whatever, and you see the ship kind of raise and Barry says goodbye or whatever, and it has that big emotional moment. When the ship raises and it finally hits that Close Encounters theme and it says a Steven Spielberg film, to me, I lift out of my seat because I'm like, this is what the movie's been building to. It's about that communication, and now it's about that awe and wonder, and people have experienced something here that they're not going to forget, that they're going to be able to pass on. I can't think of another movie right at this moment where the music all has a point to also tie in with the theme of the movie. So at the very end, when everybody's finally communicated, they're not yelling at each other. Like we talked about, Jillian and Roy, even though they have different motivations, they're still able to talk to each other and not argue. Everybody's just kind of on a different plane of existence. And the music gets you there. I know that Williams and Spielberg, they worked on that 5 notes, like from the very beginning, so they could have it to play on set. And they worked with hundreds of different permutations. And finally, they just said, let's go with this. And again, since I watched the movie last night, all I've been hearing is that 5-note theme, because it's just, it gets in your head. It's just simple. And I just think it's great that they're able to use music to finally communicate with each other and have that kind of meeting of the minds. What did everybody think of the building to that point?
Well, one thing I will say about the music is I appreciate the fact that there actually was a theme. Unlike Black Stallion, there was no theme. There's a theme in this one, and so when it does all come together, it's very rewarding.
Yeah, and again, perfectly done. Ray, what do you think?
So I liked, it actually is very similar to what you were saying, but how in the beginning of the movie, the first good chunk of the movie, everything grates on me, or it, like all the people talking over each other, or just the concept that it's like, look over here. Oh, what's this happening? Oh, wait, what am I looking? Oh, okay. Like everything just feels, it's like the orchestra warming up in the beginning and you hear that, like everybody playing over each other it's the warm up of the orchestra, I feel like, and then, you get to the point that you're like, oh, I know what story I'm in. Where are we when they're trying to get through the blockades, and there's a moment of silence, and there's things that you're like, okay, I know that I'm not where I was, but I don't totally understand where I am. And then you have okay, we're here now. We made it. And even though they still don't know what's going on, and at one point the really loud blast and it breaks the windows, and creatures are coming out and it's terrifying, and to some people, to other people it's just like, wow, amazing, while other people are like, oh my gosh, what is it? Like, everybody takes something different away from the moment, but it's whole now. It's a whole. Now it's an orchestra playing, ironically, literally music playing. And like, even when the music speeds up, I love that. I love that where it's like playing, 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 play, 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 play. Like, you know, come on guys, let's move on, we got there, what's next, you know? And I actually don't like the When You Wish Upon a Star song. It kind of pulled me out a little bit just because I don't like that song. But but I also appreciated that they were pulling things that people understood. Just in the same way that they were creating imagery, like the spaceships were supposed to kind of the smaller crafts that they had, they were communicating. They were using mathematical notes, because music is just beautiful math, and that's what they were using, the universal language of math, and they were using that to communicate with people. They were showing them imagery that they kind of were familiar with, which eventually became a part of it. And now they're at a point we're together, we're in communion now. And I loved that the sound, the music specifically, but the sound generally still had that. And so of course the aliens that want to be on the same plane with you are going to use something that's so familiar, because especially then, but honestly even now, everybody recognizes that song. Even if you don't know what it is and you can't sing the words, you know that's the Disney song, you know. And so they were taking the thing that you were familiar with and being like, see, I'm one of you, like, or not one of you, but I'm here with you. I understand you. Can you understand me? And I did appreciate how they did that, how they incorporated the sound and the music to tell the story along with the acting and the imagery.
Yeah, all ties in perfectly.
Mhm.
Ruth, any thoughts there?
Overall, I like the music. I think it worked out well. One thing I do want to say is when they're communicating with the spaceship, when they're actually there at the Devil's Tower, and the point where the spaceship starts like going crazy at one point, and then it slows down, and it gets like kind of a slower, little more like ominous note. It almost sounded like it was about to go into Jaws.
Yeah.
And like,
Yep.
I don't know. And like we're watching it, it made me laugh because I was like, well, Dreyfus was in that movie. He should be running. He knows what it means. It's a police shark coming.
Jonny?
Well,
Anything?
I made my point on music. Ruth, I don't want to steal your line. I know you have something more to say about the Pinocchio thing. So I'm not going to steal your line. I'm going to let you say it. So go ahead and talk about the Pinocchio.
Pinocchio thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so it is it seemed a bit odd at first for the reference to Pinocchio in the beginning. So they talk about, we're gonna go see Pinocchio, and then later when he's cleaning up all the stuff off of the table, there's a little Pinocchio statue.
Right.
And then like I didn't even pick up on the fact that When You Wish Upon a Star was even in there. I didn't even notice it. So there's another tie-in. So like Johnny and I were talking about it earlier. It was like it should have been something else that made sense or was more outer spacey. And then like suddenly I go, wait a second. He did an alien movie and he put Pinocchio references in it. And then later he did a Pinocchio movie and put aliens in it. It was like he was foretelling the future.
That is true. Yeah, definitely part of AI, right? So yeah, if I guess we want to maybe for the last thing go through what they think of the movie, right? But yeah, the way that the whole climax of the movie is just about communication and finally just having a conversation and being on the same page. I'm kind of awed by that's how a big blockbuster ends. It's weird that this is from the same director who would later do War of the Worlds, right? Instead of the aliens trying to kill everybody, it's the aliens trying to make a connection. Like we're all trying to make a connection. But I'll come back and I'll give some final thoughts. But just some final thoughts on Close Encounters of the Third Kind, if you want to go around. Jonny, what are your final kind of summation of it?
All right. Well, overall, I enjoy it. But I have to say, this happens a lot recently, but I get bored. I find myself getting bored watching movies. Maybe I've seen too many movies, but I just find myself getting bored. And I wish that wasn't the case with this one, but there's some stretches in this movie where I go, okay, what's next? Like, go to the next scene. I'm done with the scene already. And it kept happening. And I feel bad saying that, but it's kind of boring. And so when I get the business being a problem, when I get the talking over to being a problem, I find myself tuning out. I don't want to tune out on a Spielberg movie, especially because he's Spielberg, but I find myself tuning out and then not caring, even though I can appreciate as a whole what they're trying to say and what the movie is. I do enjoy it, but there's moments where I get bored and I don't want to get bored. So when you bore me, it's kind of like, I can do without it. Like, I don't find myself wanting to watch this one anytime soon. So it's good, but it's boring.
Well, at least it doesn't go on for 3 hours. I guess we can say that, right? Rae, final thoughts and Close Encounters.
I did also want to mention how there used to be kind of the concept that like you were an educated audience, or like that you get the references and the jokes and whatever. Did any of you notice the guy with the pipe, smoking the pipe at the end when they all of a sudden, that is, I wrote his name down, J. Allen Hynek.
Mhm.
He's the guy that coined the term close encounters. He had 5 kinds, and this was the close encounter of the third kind.
Yeah.
And they told him, okay, we're going to be doing this, and it's somewhat inspired on your work. And so they had him come. Here's your work, come to fruition. And also when the people come off of the spaceship, it's the Flight 19, and it's the guys on was it the Britannica or whatever ship that was that they found, like everything coming full circle. And for that, I love it because I feel like it almost took its own subject matter seriously without taking itself seriously. And I like that. I like when you tell me a story that I can get into. And yes, I agree with Jonny. Sometimes it got long, and sometimes it got so cacophonous that I too would tune out. And like I said, I get to the end of the scene and I'm like, what was I supposed to get from that scene? But I love that Spielberg tells you a story. I know for a long time you would ask people, is it worth remembering or is it ready for a remake? And I want to say remake if you don't preach at me, because I feel like this could be remade so beautifully today. And I just don't feel like anyone would do it justice, because nobody really tells stories anymore. Everybody has their agenda. Everybody wants to preach about whatever their thing is, and you change all of the heroes to be whatever, like, you know what I mean? Like suddenly the actor behind the character, oh, we need so many ethnicities. We need the woman to be the lead. We need whatever. And I don't care. It could have been anyone. I mean, kind of, there was the woman that, because there's Roy, but there's also mom looking for her kid. Like, I feel like those are equivalent. Like, like, I don't need to be preached to. I want to be told a story.
Yeah.
I want to walk away from the movie going, that was so awesome that they told me about their encounter with aliens. And for that, I love it. And if it could be remade in today's cinematography, today's filmography, today's
Sensibilities,
technology,
yeah, with just telling me the story, it would be like the perfect movie. This would be it.
All right, Ruth, your final thoughts?
Well, I wanted to point out some of the things that I didn't get to say before. I think overall it's a fun movie. I'm very nostalgic for it, and like the overall sense of wonder and excitement that you feel throughout the movie, and like the sense of the unknown. Is it scary? Is it exciting? Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I really enjoy that. Some things that I wanted to say real quick. I forgot to mention one other part of the business that did make sense is when he's losing his mind and he goes out and starts throwing all the stuff into the kitchen window, and he goes and steals the chicken wire from the Swan Garden, whatever, next door, and everybody and their dogs out there watching them. And that to me is so unrealistic. Unless people in the 70s were super rude and had no manners whatsoever, I feel like the little kids might have been doing that, but then the parents would see them and go, upstairs, go inside. They would have watched them from inside their windows or stuff like that. Like the lady whose stuff's being stolen, yeah, she'd come out and freak out, but everybody else would not just be standing there like a bunch of extras who were told to stand there. So that bothered me because I was like, that's just not realistic. It doesn't make sense. And like, it is kind of an interesting part of the story that they don't really want you to think about is he just left his wife and kids and just took off, like, and there's the other thing, because there's a couple things in that last scene that sort of throw me off. One, how did they know that the aliens would be okay with them sending people onto their spaceship? How did they're already planning on this before they even got there. And then it's like, do they suddenly understand their music language now? They're like, they want us to send people with them. So there's that. The other thing is they had this whole board of missing people that was sitting there. So as new people came in, like they were, reading their names off and crossing them off. I was like, again, how did they know they were going to give people back? They didn't know until they started coming off of the spaceship, but they had that whole board there. So I feel like I would have liked that better if they didn't have this board of all these people that disappeared, because some of the people probably just disappeared. They weren't abducted. And that kind of took me out of it. So it was like they already know. How do they know?
I think maybe they carry around that board everywhere they go.
You're like,
that's part of the extra scenes. So one of the extra scenes that they cut is Truffaut's character saying that something about he connected all of these, how he found Flight 19, he found the ship. He was compiling a list of missing bodies, and now that we have found these things, why are there no skeletons? There's no record of anyone making it to civilization. And so it makes sense in that because he's like, here they are, here are the people, I told you, basically. But yeah,
so
they
that
cut
would make sense to actually explain that.
Right. They cut that scene, and you're, I guess, just supposed to figure it out when you see empty planes, and then at the very beginning, and then at the very end, you see Flight 19.
Well, it's bookending the movie with disappearing and reappearing pilots, right? So it's kind of bringing that full circle. Okay, Ruth, any other things? Close out.
I think overall it's just a fun movie. I don't know that I would want to see it remade. Like, yes, it can be a little boring, but it's also, I feel like it's a product of the era in which it was made. Like, some movies just feel like they're meant to be made and the time they're made. I'm very impressed with, even today, just watching it now, how well the special effects hold up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't feel like you're looking at something fake, even though we know it is, and we know it would be even fancier to do it now. It still works. Like, it still makes sense because of all like the light and all the light glare off everything. You don't see like perfect detail everything, but that makes sense because that's how light works.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it felt very real, and it's believable, and I think it still holds up today. I think, there's a few issues here and there and a few things that could be, better, but overall it's a good movie. I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. Like, we started talking to our kids about it, and then Johnny's like, oh, but it's boring. I said, well, don't tell them that. We're trying to convince them to watch this because it's part of classic cinema. It's part of cinema history.
Is that what I said? I actually said.
We're just trying to tell them about what we watched, because you have it rented for a couple days, and you're like, oh, well, we got Close Encounters if you guys want to watch it, and they're like, and first we were saying good things, and then you're like, but it's boring, and then they weren't interested, and then we're like, oh, we're going to talk about it on the podcast. We're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll watch it, but I
don't think they'll enjoy it. I really don't think they'll enjoy it.
Yeah, probably not. I think just show them the best parts, like the kid getting abducted and maybe the ending, but some of the spaceships flying by. But other than that, I don't think it would work as well for a modern audience unless you made it a lot more jumpy or a lot more like action packed. So
Yeah, just going around and kind of incorporating your thoughts into my thoughts. Yeah, Johnny, like it's universal that the stuff with Roy kind of going crazy and build and trying to figure his stuff, that goes on a long time. That's a big stretch of the movie. And there are points where you get it, but the scene will go on for another 5 minutes, or they'll add another scene was like, I got that already. I don't need this other scene. Right. So yeah, there are stretches that are, let's move on to the next thing. I like this subplot a little better. Let's stick with that. Let's go back to the government, how they're planning on faking everybody out so they can get to Devil's Tower and have this experience by themselves, right? So that obviously ties in. Ray, you talking about it being remade. I don't think that audiences would have the patience for it today. This movie is about that, getting to that point where it's all about the sense of awe and wonder. It's amazing that that last half hour is just, that's what the climax is. It's people just on the same page and discovering things and that sense of discovery, right? And like I said, Independence Day is what people think of when they think of aliens. Like they want the destruction, they want that. So I don't think that people, it's like your kids you're talking about, they're not going to be interested because this movie is not interested in entertaining you and flooding you with imagery and keeping you entertained. It's all about kind of gradually getting you there, right? And I think that's kind of why Spielberg is constantly tinkering with this, or why he has constantly tinkered, because there's a perfect movie in here. I don't think it's perfect. I think there are issues with it. I think that it, like you talked about, it's shrill, it goes on too long. And I think why Spielberg keeps working on it is it's very personal to him. He got stuff that he knows is in there and he keeps trying to make it work. And no matter what version you do, there's going to be these long stretches that are just kind of filled with boredom, right? And that's why he's trying to kind of redo it. The special effects, Ruth, you talked about, isn't it amazing when they're on the hilltop and you see the little, like the ice cream cone or whatever, and they've got the little teeny spaceship that kind of follows after him? They're special effects, but they're given personality, right? Those spaceships have character.
Yeah, but who is riding that tiny spaceship?
Right.
Is it like a drone or something that follows along, or is it like a puppy dog? Like,
Yeah.
that's why I was like, that must have inspired Batteries Not Included, because they literally felt like they were characters themselves instead of
Yeah.
ships that people were riding in. But yeah, I want to know who's in that tiny spaceship.
Yeah.
Like, who is it?
Again,
another little extra from the extras was that he was trying to show that there are multiple races and not just of the
Oh,
gray alien. Like you see the weird spider marionette thing, and then you
yeah,
see the little
little
ballerinas,
cute
you know,
ones. Mhm.
and then you see the guy that does the thing.
Uh-huh.
who oddly looked a lot like Carrie Guff.
E.T.'s cousin.
They look like 18.
His face looked exactly like
Yeah.
Carrie. I was like, oh wow, they
Oh,
just did
yeah,
a
kind
an
of,
inversion
yeah.
of him.
But like he was trying to show, and with the different shapes of the spaceship, the craft, he was trying to show that like maybe that's why they took people from Earth, because they have people from everywhere. They have beings of all sorts, and apparently Earth is not ready to lose their people yet, except for Dreyfus, you know, but
Yeah.
but and so and that was supposed to be why they gave them back. Like, oh, okay, this was supposed to be a good thing. If you're not ready for this, that's okay.
Mhm.
Go home. We're not holding you hostage. That was supposed to be what they kind of showed. So maybe the little people are on the little spacecraft. Like, I don't know. But
Mhm.
like,
Tiny green aliens.
yeah, another thing that is like Darin was talking about, it's the coming together, and it was supposed to be like an intergalactic coming together type of a.
Yeah, I don't think that translates.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, you get that some of them are slightly different. And that's one thing I do appreciate Spielberg's love for aliens. But for me, other than E.T., his aliens just don't feel realistic in that, like that spidery one. It's like, how is he walking on those weird legs? How is that holding up that big torso? Like the little alien ones, they're like actual little kids just with masks. They made sense. But like, then you watch AI and they have these extremely CGI, like pearlescent clear, like stick skinny, just strange shaped aliens. And I think I would have liked that part of that movie better if they had a little more of a humanoid appearance to them and they felt a little more realistic in proportions. Just because, I don't know, like when he does characters that seem realistic or possible, I like them. But when it gets too fantastical or too crazy with it, it pulls me out. I really don't think that aliens, if they did exist, would be that much different from us, like to that extent. I think they'd be different, but not so much that it wouldn't make sense with biology or logic or science. I don't know. Anyways, that's just me going off on that.
Well, it is funny because in AI artificial intelligence, those aren't. I don't mean to gotcha there, but those aren't aliens at the end. Those are actually androids.
They're androids.
Yeah, they're because the whole movie is about the androids replacing humans, right? And that's what everybody's afraid of.
Again, if he was trying to tell me that, I've watched that movie several times and I did not get that. I got that they were aliens. So why are they so fascinated by the little boy if they themselves are androids? But they talked about humans like you're the lasting memory of humans' genius, like they aren't.
Because they've
that was
lost their
confusing.
humanity. They've lost all semblance of humanity.
Yeah. Well, we could go in for another half hour on artificial intelligence and basically how the human race was wiped out. The human race had been wiped out, and so the androids are trying to, and so they have that anyway. So so I get that. There's all these little random stuff that are happening in Close Encounters, right? I get that. And so there's all these little faults and things that we can kind of question. Again, it comes down to that last half hour. And I think, Ruth, you talking about the special effects, why they feel so real today is because they were trying. They were ahead of the curve. Jonny and I have talked about this before. A band like Queen, who's trying to create new things, they feel modern today, even though they were more popular in the 70s and 80s, because they were trying to be forward and trying to be kind of be ahead of the curve. And so that's why it feels modern today, because they were trying to do new things instead of just doing the same. That's why CGI isn't going to have the same kind of effect as like model work and things like that. The last thing I want to mention is we didn't mention the cinematography of Vilmos Zsigmond, who also did the cinematography for Deer Hunter, Jonny, that we talked about. He did McCabe and Mrs. Miller. He went on and did Witches of Eastwick. He went on and did Maverick, of all things, Ghost in the Darkness. He did win the Oscar for Best Cinematography for this movie.
Well, because he didn't jump the line in this movie. That's why he won it.
There you go. But again, it's all that they were just trying it on. They didn't know what the spaceships looked like. They didn't know how they were going to integrate it. I think the cinematography, and again, Julia Phillips, one of the producers, was in constant conflict with Zsigmond because he was trying to do things and she wanted him to do it her way, like the studio way. And he's, again, ahead of that curve. So being able to incorporate those special effects, being able to take Trumbull's work and kind of make it kind of a part of the image that you're watching. Again, just gorgeous cinematography. So I read that, it won the Oscar, like great. Like it's a memorable looking movie, right? So even though it's not perfect, I don't know, it's that sense of wonder that you don't find in movies today. It's all about the flash. It's all about SpongeBob SquarePantsing it. It's all about the constant, like ADHD to keep your attention stuff. The way that this movie is about awe and wonder, and the way that the whole movie is about that sense and discovery, that's what I take away from it, even though it's got these kind of imperfections kind of mixed in. So again, I'm a big fan of Close Encounters. You know, I'm a big fan of Spielberg. I like that I was able to talk Jaws with you guys on Paperback Flicks. I like that we're able to talk, again, the only other 70s movie that I have real strong feelings for besides Jaws is this one. So I like we're able to talk about it. So just wrapping it up, Paperback Flicks, if you want to tell us how to find you guys, what you're got in the pipe, what your recent episodes are, just let us know a little bit more about you two and how we can find you and become fans, because I think everybody should.
Well, so Paperback Flicks, we've got the YouTube, we've got the podcast. Is it just through Libsyn? I've never actually.
Yeah, it's through Libsyn that we publish, but then they put it on other places too.
Yeah. So I like the video component personally. I started watching NostalgiaCast when it was watching.
That's right.
But we've also got website paperbackflicks.com, which has the podcast and it has the videos, and people can suggest. We've done a couple of their suggestions before when people there's a line for them to suggest different books to film, books that have had film adaptations, and we do short stories and stuff like that too. Like it's not just strictly like classical works or whatever. We do everything. Yeah, I've already forgotten the one that we just did. Holes. We just did Holes not too long ago, and we've got Firestarter. coming up here real soon.
Ooh, speaking of
The-
Barrymore, right?
What? Yeah, Drew Barrymore, and then there's a newer one with Zac Efron.
Yeah.
So we've got that coming up. We've also we do the indie author interviews, like Ruth was talking about. We've done a few of them, including Ruth. I interviewed Ruth at
Right.
one point.
She is an author, after all. Yeah.
Is an author.
Well, ladies, Ray, Ruth, we really appreciate you coming on and being able to talk about this again. I'm glad they were all able to communicate and get on the same page with the movie.
Yes.
I'm
feel
glad
like
it
I
wasn't
always-
boring. I'm
Yeah.
glad
That's a load off. Okay. So Paperback Flicks, everybody, please go check them out. Thank you for joining us for the conversation. Thank you for being on. We look forward to having you on again in the future. Ray, maybe we could make this a regular season-long thing. Have you on as well. Love to have you on some more.
Yep,
So-
I'm down.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you later.